the sole purpose of your CV, the only purpose it serves, is to get you an interview. Once you get an interview, it's you now and not the CV. The CV doesn't matter anymore. So my question to you is, if the sole purpose of a CV is to get interviews, how good is your CV? Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. You know what time it is. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. Woohoo! Hope you are doing awesome. Hope you are having an amazing year. Depending on when you're listening to this, it's probably early 2023, right? So we're just sort of getting started with another exciting year. And just a couple things to always keep in mind. Are you clear on your targets? On what you want to accomplish and where you want to go? And remember, don't wait. If you want something, start working on it right now. One of the discussions that comes up constantly with my one-on-one coaching clients, my group coaching, my CISO cert, is this whole idea of when should I start looking for a CISO job? And the big mistake is they always give a future date. And the real answer is now. There's a lot that you have to do to get all the pieces optimized to be able to get a job as a CISO. So why are you going to wait until August or September? The question I always ask is, when people go, "Oh, Eric, I want to get my first CISO job in August. I'm not looking right now. I want to wait till August." I said, it's okay. Question. If in March you get an offer to be a CISO at a Fortune 500 company and they're paying you $400K salary with a $300K bonus, total comp almost $750,000, would you turn that down? Would you say, nope, sorry, I said I'm waiting till August and I will not accept an offer until August? Of course not. Right? Almost everybody would go, of course I take that. That would be amazing. That would be great. So the point is, why are you waiting till August? Start today. If you have targets or you have goals that you want to achieve later in the year, really spend some time questioning why. Why can't I start today? Why can't I start the process and start looking at the steps? Do you realize that if you want to get a job as a CISO in August, it could take 6 months? Here's why. The first thing you have to do is make sure your resume is interview ready. Do you realize the first step in most cases? Now, if you know somebody, a recommendation completely different, but in most cases, the first thing you need to do is submit a CV, and it has to get past the review process in that they call you in for an interview. The sole purpose of your CV, the only purpose it serves, is to get you an interview. Once you get an interview, it's you now and not the CV. The CV doesn't matter anymore. So my question to you is, if the sole purpose of a CV is to get interviews, how good is your CV? Submit it to 20 jobs. Submit your CV to 20 CISO jobs and see how many interviews you get. If you get 0, I'm going to use some very professional language here. Your resume stinks. It's terrible. It's not a CISO resume. You got 0 out of 20. That's not good. Wouldn't you rather know that now than in August? Wouldn't you rather recognize that's a problem now until August? So then, what do? You fix it. You start removing things and changing things and look at other CISO and resumes and start updating and making it look similar. And then you submit it again to 20. Now you get 4. Our goal is to get north of 50. If you have a properly done CV that's focused accurately on your skill sets and focused on being a CISO and showing that you're a CISO, you should be getting about 10 or 11 interviews for every 20 you submit. That's sort of the goal. So how do you know that? By submitting it. So you got to start. That could take a couple months, right? Updating, reviewing, resubmitting. So right there, just getting your CV ready could be a couple months. And that's something, if you do nothing else, that has to be done. You want to make sure you have an interview quality CV. But then the question I get, but Eric, what if I get interviews? I'm not ready. That's awesome. What's the best time to interview for a job? When you're not looking. There's no pressure. If you've been looking for 6 months and you haven't been finding a job, and by the way, I'm not going to confess that on anyone. That's purely an example. You're all going to get jobs instantly, right? But let's just hypothetically, and you get an interview, you're going to be pretty nervous, right? You're going to be, I better ace this. I better ace it. But if you're not looking and you don't really need a job now, you don't want a job until 5 or 6 months from now, then the pressure's off. And remember, interviewing is a skill like anything else. You got to put the reps in. The more times you interview, the better you get at it. It's like going to the gym. You got to put in the reps. So now, great. You get some interviews. Once again, we're not planning on taking the job. Remember, wink, wink, wink. We're not planning on taking the job. But you're just building the skills. So now you got a interview-ready resume, and you now ace the interviews. So worst case scenario, worst possible case scenario, you actually get job offers. Now you have 2 options. One is you turn it down. No, there's nothing wrong. People turn down job offers all the time. You say, listen, I was looking at a salary of $400. I recognize you can only pay $200. I'm not looking for the job right now. Or I'm no longer looking, or I got another offer. There's no harm or no foul. And here's the coolest part. Companies that are looking in March won't be looking in August. So it's not like you've burnt any bridges. Best case scenario, once again, you're in the strongest possible position because you don't need a job. So you can actually negotiate. You can negotiate, hey, if you give $100K more, I'll take the job. And if they don't, doesn't matter. So this is the process. Start today. Don't wait. Right? Everyone wants to wait until the perfect moment, and then a couple things happen. There's never the perfect moment, and the perfect moment happens, and you go, I didn't realize it takes 3 months to tune my resume. I didn't realize it takes a couple months to get good at interviewing, and now you're 6 months. You went from 6 months ahead to 6 months behind. So anything that you have as goals later in the year, just reevaluate and say, what can I start doing today? What can I start focusing on today to move them forward? And then what I really want to talk about on today's episode of Life of a CISO is a superpower that makes you a world-class CISO. And every one of you can do this skill. It's a skill you have to learn. It's a skill that you have to practice, but every one of you has the capability. And that skill that if you can master will make you world-class is reframing. The idea of reframing is, can we look at a situation from a different perspective? Can we look at a situation and instead of it being the executives don't like me, they don't trust me, and they won't let me attend the board meeting, because that's one frame, you could reframe it as, I haven't showed the executives my value. If they knew my value, they would absolutely invite me to the meetings. So I'm not going to be frustrated. I got to do a better job of showing my value. That's a reframe. You're basically taking a situation and choosing different data to process. Here's the amazing thing. If you look at any physical situation that occurs, like right now, you sitting there watching this video and just looking around the room or wherever you're at, there are millions and millions of possible data that your senses can pull in, that you can see, that you can hear. Well, if you're watching and listening to this, hopefully there's no taste or sound unless you're eating lunch. That's okay. But essentially, right now, your eyes and ears are basically processing. Here's the issue, though. There's millions upon millions of data points, but your sensors can only pull in a few thousand. So your senses are basically pulling in anything that aligns with your beliefs and your thoughts of the situation. So if you believe that the executives in your organization are evil and don't like you, you will look at every scenario and come up with evidence to support that, because you don't want to prove yourself a liar. You want to prove that you are a good, honest person and you're aligned with your beliefs and thoughts. But if you believe that your executives are on your side, that want to help you and have your best interest and know how valuable you are, and those are your thoughts and beliefs, now you're going to look at that situation and pull completely different data. You're going to come up with completely different conclusions of what's happening. So the trick of reframing is awareness. Being aware of how you interpret a scenario. And then if you don't like that interpretation, go, okay, what are the thoughts or beliefs that cause me to think that way? And then what are the new thoughts or beliefs that I need to think to be able to come up with the desired results? Because in any situation, you can see good or bad. It's really how you decide to frame the scenario. An example I like to use that really illustrates and drives us home is there are two brothers. These two brothers were raised by their dad because their mom passed away when they were young. The dad tried to do the best job he could, but he was struggling and he was mourning the loss of his wife, and he didn't do a good job. The boys were beaten. The boys were abused. They were in and out of foster homes because the dad was constantly being arrested and put in jail. He was just not a good dad. He just wasn't a good dad to those boys. And the boys grew up, and then they caught up with these boys when they were 30. So they found one of the brothers at age 30, and he was very successful. He was running his own business, worth millions of dollars, happily married, 3 kids, an amazing dad. And they looked at him and said, how could you have turned out this way based on how you were grown up, how you were raised by that abusive father who was in and out of jail? And he sort of looked at him and said, what do you mean? I had no option but to be successful because my dad set such a good example of what not to do that I knew exactly what I needed to do to be successful. I basically just avoided everything my dad did and did the opposite. So how in the world, being grown up in such a bad household, could I not use those lessons to learn and be successful? That's a frame. That's how he chose to view it. Same brother. They were twins, by the way, so they're both 30. They ran up with the other brother. The other brother was in and out of jail, had multiple kids that he didn't know, didn't have any great relationships, was really not a good model citizen, was in constant trouble and just not having a good time or very successful in life. And they asked him, based on how you were growing up, how could you have turned out this way? And he looked at him and goes, what do you mean? I had no choice. Based on the example that my dad gave, I had no possible option other than to follow in his footsteps. How could I not have turned out just the way he was based on the example he set? Very interesting frame. Two different people grew up in the exact same environment, and one decided to use it as a lesson of what not to be, and the other one decided to do exactly the same thing as that person. That's what we call reframing or framing, right? How do you look at a scenario? Do you look at a scenario as good, or do you look at it as a scenario as bad? Do you look at a scenario as an opportunity, or do you look at a scenario as an obstacle? Because it's really your choice. Any situation, no matter what happens, and that was a pretty bad situation those two people grew up in, but one of them still managed to see it as a positive, as a lesson learned. The other one basically viewed it as a negative and an obstacle. So just always keep that in mind as how are you viewing situations, and is that frame or view that you're using really serve you to be a world-class CISO? Now, why is this important? And why does this even come up? It's come up a lot because of this concept of security as a business enabler. I constantly say world-class CISOs must focus on the business. They must focus on using cybersecurity as a strategic weapon to help and grow the business. And then I also say world-class CISOs know the golden rule. The golden rule is if cybersecurity negatively impacts the business, security is wrong. Cybersecurity cannot negatively impact the business. That's the difference between a world-class security engineer and a world-class CISO, a different frame. World-class security engineers believe that they can negatively impact the business. There are cases where the security is so bad, you should not do it. You just shouldn't do it. It's too big a risk. However, world-class CISOs know there's always a solution. There's always an option. I'll give you two examples. One example, a newer CISO who was a world-class security engineer and believed that the only way to get promoted was to become a CISO, but he loved being a security engineer, and he was still a security engineer with a CISO title. So the company had this web portal application, and it had tons of vulnerabilities. I mean, it was in bad shape. And he goes to the board, and he recommends that we take this down. This represents too big a risk to the organization. There's too many vulnerabilities. This is an accident waiting to happen. This will be compromised, and there will be a ransomware extortion attack, and it will cost the company $5 to $8 million. Therefore, we should take this application down permanently. One problem. the application was generating $50 million of revenue a year, and I'll just make the math easy, was 50% margins profitable. So you had an application that really didn't require any energy effort. It's bringing in $50 million in revenue and $25 million in profit to the organization. And this CISO comes in and says, you should take that down. You basically should stop generating $50 million in revenue because I said so. Could you see how that would be negatively interpreted by the board? Could you see why that CISO would not get invited back to meetings? And you could see why that CISO, if they continue down that path, would most likely lose their job. Because that's not smart for the business. That is not a smart business decision for you to say as a chief, as a business executive, to take down a $50 million application. That's crazy. Here's the reframe. What they should have done is they should have went to the board and said, listen, we have this amazing app. It's generating $50 million in revenue and $25 million in profit a year. But it's been neglected and it's broken. It has vulnerabilities and it has issues. And if we continue down this path, we have over a 95% chance that it will cost us between $5 to $8 million in extortion or ransom payments. So I would like to take $2 million of the profit, so we're still making $23 million this year, one time $2 million from the profit, and I would like to reinvest it in the security to basically minimize or reduce that threat of $5 to $8 million loss. That's how you frame it. Do you see the difference? One is going against the business, the first way of saying take it down. The second way is saying, listen, just give me a small percent and let me fix it. Just give me a small amount so we can actually address the issue and make it better and more secure. That's a superpower. Because the latter, you will be a hero and everyone on the board will think you're a genius for presenting it that way. The former, you're probably not going to last very long as a CISO. So that's the power. I'll give you another example that comes up a lot. A lot of companies that you might be a CISO for are constantly acquiring new companies. That's a common business theme of how companies grow. So I have several of my clients that are in this situation where the company is acquiring these other companies that are not very secure. They're vulnerable and they have exposures. So a specific example is I had somebody come to me and said, Eric, our company is going to acquire or wants to acquire another company, but they got hit with a ransomware attack. They paid $3 million in ransom. And as far as we know, they never fixed or addressed any of the vulnerabilities on the system. And they said, Eric, I want to go to the executive and tell them they shouldn't make the purchase. What do you think? I said, reframe. So let me help you out here. World-class CEOs are always pushing the envelope. They're always taking calculated risk. Buying companies is a calculated risk. Acquiring another company is a calculated risk. So they're used to doing it, and they're used to people telling them, no, 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 no. World-class CEOs basically ignore negators. Anybody that says no or you shouldn't do it, or they're like, you don't understand my role. I'm great at this. Leave me alone. So if you come in as the CISO and you're like, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this, they're just going to push you away. Reframe. What if, let's say the company that we're acquiring is worth $60 million and it has a 3x evaluation. So we got to acquire it for $180 million. You go to the CEO and say, listen, I looked at the company and I agree with you. This is a great acquisition. This really matches very well with what we do and it could really expand. However, I want to make you aware that this company has a lot of exposures and vulnerabilities, and for us to get them to the level of our quality, of how we operate and how we do business and security, it's going to require $5 million to fix all their problems. So what I recommend is instead of offering them $180 million, you offer them $175 and then take the $5 million you would have spent and give that to security to be able to implement security within that environment. Now, if you don't think they will take anything below 180, I want you to recognize that we are going to need $5 million to integrate this into our security. So you should recognize that the purchase price then is really $185 million. I just want you to understand what the financial investment is from a security standpoint, so you can either adjust the price or put that in to the valuation that you perform. Can you see the completely different reframe? Now you're making them fully aware. Now you're giving them options on how to approach the scenario. You're letting them know what the monetary cost is, and you're giving them different ways that they can adjust or take that into account. Can you see how that is so much more powerful than no? The nope, you shouldn't do it. That's a much more powerful stance to come at it from. That's the power of reframe. Now, I always get some folks that are newer CISO going, but Eric, they might not give us, stop. You're missing the point. The point is not whether or not you really do or don't get the $5 million. The point is they are aware. So if they choose to not give you the $5 million, they know the company's vulnerable, and they now know there's high potential for vulnerabilities and attack on the system. And if you've done your job correctly and they truly believe in security and what you do, there's absolutely no reason why they wouldn't give you the $5 million. So we need to stop this, but what if they don't? What if they don't? No, we need to show up and present our data in a positive manner that supports the business. And this is a skill like any other skill. So I urge you, as you go through this week or this month, or even this year, be much more aware of how you're interpreting situations and how you're approaching it, and look at how can I reframe it. Remember, world-class security engineers frame everything as no, no, no. World-class security engineers say, take down the website, we shouldn't acquire the company. World-class CISOs are all about yes, yes, yes. World-class CISOs go in and say, we should buy the company, but discount it by $5 million. We should keep the website up, but reinvest $2 million in security. So spend some time being very aware of how can you reframe, because if you can master the art of reframing, like I showed you in these two examples, you can and you will be a world-class CISO. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Life of a CISO, and have an amazing week.